let's get going. Let's get rocking and rolling. Because as I said, the first part of this is just to update you guys a little bit on what we've been up to a little bit, and then we'll get straight into it. So just give me a thumbs up. You can see my screen. Thank you, Maddie. All right. So this is number 8, which is pretty cool, I think. This is, as I said earlier, the first huddle where it's not a deep dive of the elements of MEDDICC. So those who have been to the huddles before know we went through each element and kind of did some brainstorming, deep dives, shared some great best practice, all that sort of stuff. Going forward, we're going to continue on the regular huddles and make them around themes, topics that are pressing to you. So generally, obviously, MEDDICC generally is in or around complex enterprise solution kind of sales. And so a lot of the topics we'll talk about will be relating to those types of deals with a kind of a link to MEDDICC a lot of the time. Like, for example, today, we're talking about how you can use preparation to help you win that first meeting. So as I said, I want to give you a brief update on a couple of bits and bobs, nothing too much, but in terms of the first thing around huddle etiquette, one thing I really have loved about the previous huddles is there's this kind of comfort, I think is what I would call it, where some people contribute loads, some people are just happy to observe, some people have their cameras on, some people don't, some people are muted, and I really like that. I really like the idea of that, this is our community. We come together. No one has to participate, but of course, everyone is really encouraged and welcome to participate as well. So anyone that's new or anything like that, that's kind of the vibe I want. I really like. I don't know if anyone's been playing with like Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse. I like that vibe where you've got a lot of people tuned in because they're interested on a topic, and a lot of people contribute all the way through. Some people just put their hand up and contribute when something comes to them, and other people just observe. And that's kind of like what I'd like us to have here. So just feel whatever category of that you see yourself falling into, you are most welcome is the most important part. Next up, subgroups. This is something I've mentioned to a few of you, but I'm starting to think about how we can kind of bring the power of this community together and kind of empower people to have subgroups. So for example, sales leaders, enablement, people that may be in certain geographies, or all these types of things. So I'm just planting the seed with you guys. If there's any of those, any sort of subgroup that would appeal to you that you'd like to be involved in, that's kind of the direction I kind of see this community going to grow together. But just as many of you noticed, particularly in like the Slack channel, I'm not trying to like build loads of channels. I'm trying to I'm not trying to like artificially create engagement. I want it to be very organic. So we're trying to keep that balance of having like a whole list of channels that no one talks in, combined with trying to inspire so that we kind of come together. We've got a leadership enablement program that's coming soon. So probably early next year, it'll be like an extension of the masterclass for people that are in leadership and enablement. So it'll be basically like, how can you bring MEDDICC into your cadences as one-to-ones, workshops, role plays, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just kind of planting the seed with you guys there with that. There's more on that will be coming soon. In fact, one of the exercises we're going to do today is from that program. And then let's get into it. So the topic today is preparing to win. I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about why, like, obviously we all know the importance of preparation, but kind of some of the sort of the lengths that I see the most elite people go to when it comes to preparation. And then we're going to do what I'm really excited about is a preparation best practice brainstorm. So one thing I've always noticed when we get together is there are these gems that are inside of your heads that if we can pull them out and share them, we all get better together. So that's something I'm really kind of quite excited about. Cool. All right. So hello, I've come off of sharing screen. I can see lots of familiar, happy faces. Good to see you all. All right, let me bring up my other screen. Where is it? There we go. Okay, so I don't know if anyone's using this or has come across this. This is the deal sheet. I'll put a link in the chat here so you can just use this. This is the idea here. This is just somewhere I started this when I was selling, where I would go and like it would live for the life of my deal, so I can share it with execs, I can share it with my SE. I kind of like, it's like a live notebook is kind of how I used it. And the idea was I would capture information about who stakeholders were, and it was my kind of place to brainstorm and build as I go on. And what I want to just talk about this for a second is, we all know, I'm not gonna like tell you the importance of preparation. We all know like how important it is to be prepared. But for me, there's like always a next level of preparation that we can go to as salespeople that can really kind of take us to the next, well, I don't say to the next level, to what I would class as our full potential. So I'm a big fan of thinking about your ability as a salesperson or sales leader or whatever role you're doing in revenue, as you have your full potential. And what I love to think about is how can we all come together and think about how can we all move towards our full potential. So it's not about being the best in your team, although that's obviously a good thing to think about as well. We're just talking about being the best versions of ourselves, meeting our full potential. And for me, preparation is really key in that. Because so much of what we go into that first meeting with a customer is we're going to be on the back foot straight away, because unfortunately, to say it, our industry isn't great. Like the standard salesperson in our industry is not great, which I think is a good thing for people like us that are like leaning into our profession or our ability. But it means that our customers are going in with an expectation that we're not going to have done our research. We're going to go straight into a pitch. We're not going to respect their time, and we're just going to talk over them. That's kind of like the standard of what they expect. So if we can go in and hit the ground running by saying, like, straight away, I'm ready to go here. I'm ready to kind of show you not only that I've done my research, but because of that, a byproduct of that is the customer will be like, wow, this person's really respecting time, and they're also respecting their time. And then my favorite part of looking prepared is the impression it gives to the customer that says, this person must believe there is enough value in their solution for me for them to have done all this work. Because if they didn't really believe what they're about to talk to me about was going to really blow my socks off, then they wouldn't have put in all that work. So it's kind of like this, you're setting yourself up to come across to the customer by preparing just the best possible version of yourself. And so when I think about preparing for a meeting, I go down to the level of, obviously, things we'll talk about in a minute, like stakeholder planning, research, and that sort of thing. But I will start to map out what I think the M1s are going to be, not just one M1, but I'll think about M1s from the customer's industry. I'll think about the use cases they're likely to have, and I'll think about M1s that relate to that. I'll think about the third-party partner network. Maybe they work with a certain tech product. Maybe they work with a certain SI or agency or something like that. Who else have I got metrics ones from those kind of customers with? Same thing with anticipated objections. What do I think will be an objection I get from this customer that by me role-playing just in my head, running it over in my head, I'm going to be super ready to tackle that objection if it comes up. But here's the real key thing. That's great, being ready to tackle the objections or to have the angle you want to talk to the customer about. But I actually think it goes a step further here. And some people will think this is a bit wishy-washy. I don't really care. I really believe in this stuff, which is that I think our subconscious is way more powerful than we give it credit for being. And I think that when we do things like prepare and put ourselves in a position where we've considered things like, if I had a chance to inject something into the decision criteria with this meeting that I haven't even met the customer yet, what things would I inject in? What things do I think this customer is likely to have as an objection against my products, right? All those different things. If I can get myself super ready and like all prepared to tackle those things, not only will I be ready to answer them if they happen, if they say, hey, what other things should we be considering for this project? Or, if they raise an objection, but also, and this is the really key one for me, is my subconscious is going to be ready for them, right? And so what that means is when one person says something across the Zoom or across the room to the other, to their colleague, your customer says to your colleague, I'll hear something in what they say that will trigger me think, oh, actually, I think they might be talking about that objection I thought they might have. If I hadn't done the preparation, then I wouldn't have heard that thing. So it's a little bit like my analogy that I love for this, and I think I might have spoken to a few of you about this before, but if you're at a party having a drink and you're chatting to your friends and you hear somebody say your name, you turn around and look because you hear your name. When you turn around and look and you see the other group of people who said your name talking, you can't hear what they're saying. But somehow when you weren't even listening, you heard their name. And I think that's what our subconscious is doing, because our subconscious has been told over time and time again, to listen for our name, listen for our company's name, listen for our industry. And so if we put ourselves in a position where we say something's really important to ourselves, our subconscious will pick up on that and think, oh, I think that person might be talking about that objection, or, oh, I think that's an opportunity for me to talk about something that I've planned that would be good to talk about in this. So I really believe in that stuff. And I think it's like, you'll know that feeling. You won't necessarily tie these dots together, but you will know that feeling when you're sat in a meeting, you hear something said and you think, oh, that's this, I know I've got something good to say here. I've got something that's really going to be valuable to this customer to talk about. That only happens when you've put yourself in the position to kind of really nail those opportunities. And that all comes from preparation. So I'd love to hear if anyone's got any comments there, just while we shift into the exercise. I'll open up, come off mute, jump in the chat, all that kind of stuff. Good stuff.
Well, Andy, I can jump in. So one of the things that we're doing, sorry, if everybody doesn't know me, I'm Adam, I'm from Allocadia. And we did a session with Andy at our kickoff this year, and he presented that, I guess, the preparation document he shared at the start of the session. So at Allocadia, we had already implemented that, or a version of that, actually, that Maddie created. I'm not sure if she's still on the call, but that's been really powerful for not only setting reps up for success, but also setting up additional folks around the organization that also need to be briefed into meetings. So it's one of those things that, like, I don't know, as a sports guy, it was kind of like practice to play well. The hard work is in the practice. And if you practice preparing, it's going to be easier. So now I can fly through it, and it's very, very smooth for me. But it is also a tremendous way to keep track of your opportunities with more granularity than something like what's in a Salesforce. So shout out to Andy for sharing that. And I think it's a fantastic Salesforce.
Yeah, great point. And the other thing about this as well is it's scalable, right? So anytime you put some preparation into an upcoming meeting, it's not like you thinking about those objections, or you thinking about that decision criteria, or those metrics are like one and done. There will be, every time, therefore, you go into another meeting, you'll have those things kind of omnipresent, and it will help you in other meetings as well. So it's super scalable from that basis.
I think
go on, sorry, Maddie.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I think from a structural perspective, it's very helpful to understand kind of clearly in categories and visually grouped. So that's structural. Operationally, I'm not sure if it was you or, I'm sure some thought leader in the space mentioned it's always a valuable and a personal point of pride for them, and I've adopted this myself, to share something in the meeting that potentially your, prospective champion didn't know about the business, and that is highly actionable and relevant. So best champions kind of can rest their cap on the success of a project that, in theory, we want to sign them to. And to get some of those insights and prepare myself for calls with champion stakeholders, you name it, I tend to try to leverage some strategic insights, often coming from maybe an investor deck or an annual report. There's nothing more point blank, direct, and that you can hold them accountable to, quite like hat in hand, how they represent themselves to their shareholders, their investors, how they identify their successes, their areas for improvement, their category, how they understand themselves, where they're going and where they're coming from. So whereas the structure, the format that we're sharing or the versions we create and iterate upon are great ways to centralize and communicate this, it's also an area where I find that it's helpful to kind of pull in some elements that you can speak to, and to which you may be able to attach your project as a larger strategic initiative. And that's part of my prep work.
Yeah, I love that, Maddie. And I think sometimes people think about that kind of research into things like the annual report and see Elizabeth mentioning the investor relations sections. The thing about today, it's so easy. We can just do Control or Command F and search for the keywords we know are applicable. So if we're in marketing in tech, we can look for things around advertising, we look for things around brand. The same for, for an IT tech, we can look for things around infrastructure, look for the word cloud, all these types of things. And it's like, it's the amount of times it's right there in black and white in the annual report, whatever your solution does, they're looking to solve it. And like Maddie says, there is no better feeling, just from a perspective of showing you have credibility to the customer, than going in and saying, hey, look, I've done my research here, and what better place to do it. I love that. I love it. Good stuff. All right, so looking forward to this. So this is our mirror. I mentioned earlier, we've got this leadership enablement kind of program coming out, and a lot of it is, let me just kind of give you like a snapshot. So it's like a lot of these different exercises for each letter of MEDDICC. There's like different kind of, you can do things like map out your decision process, things like around building out champions, qualifying champions, things about like brainstorming, like SWOT analysis for different types of competition. So there's a lot of like exercises. The one that we're going to do today is around first meeting preparation. And so the idea here is what I would love us to do is, like I said earlier, each one of us has an absolute gem of something that you do to prepare yourself for a first meeting. And I've kind of broken it down into 3 different kind of stages, if you like: the before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. And then even further from then, broken them into these sub sort of stages, which is like the 2 things you do before is obviously research, but then what you do with that research, kind of what to the pre-work you do, what actions might you do ahead of that meeting, i.e. send an agenda out. And then during the meeting, so how do you kind of set up right for that meeting? A lot of our meetings nowadays are remote. So what can you do to make sure you're going to, hit the ground running? Ideas for introing the meeting while the meeting's on, and then thereafter. So in terms of research, I think, Maddie, you've probably nailed my favorite one, which is like read the annual report. Is there anything else? I think, Elizabeth, you mentioned the investor section. I think it depends. I think there is definitely something here as well around the culture, well, not cultural, but the geographic. So, for example, in the UK, our annual reports tend to be quite good. Quite good in respect to they read a bit like a brochure. Like you're thinking about buying our stock. Here's why you should buy it. In the US, I've noticed they tend to be much more formal, much more black and white. And so, are there any documents that we should consider for different geographies or different types of document? What have we got? So you mentioned investor relations. I think that's a good one. So I'll put that under the same here as sort of investor relations. There you go. All right. I can see the chat's firing up. Good to see.
The other one, especially with like US based organizations, is their SEC filing. Mm-hmm. So as they're ramping up and preparing, like there's a lot of information that goes into this. Like their whole marketing team sometimes is dedicated, for example, for us, in developing out, like especially if they're doing like a road show of some sort, or they're preparing to get that awareness out. The SEC. Yeah,
like that.
SEC. I think you make a really valid point there. A lot is disclosed there within, and I think it will be kind of picked up on and built, fleshed out through like a strategic and operational lens through other sources of reporting, like investor reporting. For example, I found an organization was $4 billion in debt with a return to solvency plan by 2028. And so is that not a very compelling reason for them to be, insert your rationale, in this case, better stewards of marketing dollars to drive revenue and cut out waste? But these are really valuable sources of insight. Not always the most flattering though. So it's something that I've been kind of mulling over. How fine of a point do you want to make? And how heavy-handed do you want to be in how you present that information? So sometimes the research that we do here can be shared behind the scenes, not necessarily on a first call, but maybe as you're creating some sort of compelling proposal with some more solid, metrics and potential returns, then it can be shared with your champion to be used at, with discretion.
Yeah, you don't want to call their baby ugly in the first meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, people don't like having their babies called ugly, but then it's like, oh, here's under the carpet. Here's all the shit.
Okay.
So you're going under that. What's that like? That's great.
You're capsizing. We tend to look at win wires or win references internally for companies in the same industry or have a similar deliverable, and we try to pull out any type of talking points or M1 metrics from the win references to be used in the conversations early on, based on your insights, Andy.
Yeah, I like that. How would you articulate that onto a post-it for research purposes?
Research reference database, win reference database.
Yeah.
I think in my market, there's also a big element around qualitative intel. So I work mostly in Africa, and there's often a lot of politics. So it's not about what you know, who you know. So trying to understand who these people are how they were employed. You know, is it a government entity? Are they employed by the government? Are they there based on merit, or are they there based on politics? You know, what kinds of strengths do you need to speak to? Are they on the way in, or on the way out? All of those kind of things, which you can get through, you know, the news, through partners, various other kind of strategic sources as well.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's such a, it's such like one of those things that it takes you a few years to get your head around how, you know, different things culturally, different things geographically can impact deals so much. But once it kind of clicks, you kind of, well, if you're like me, you look back and you think, God, how did I not see the signs sooner? You kind of kick yourself, but feel glad that you've kind of fixed it going forward. So I think you mentioned, Maddie mentioned sort of PR. I think that's a good one as well in terms of like getting news. You can really find some interesting stuff out. Someone else I thought, yeah, Joseph said job postings, which I think is a really good one. I had a person in one of my teams before who had a ton of Google alerts set up around keywords for jobs around the industry we worked in. So we would spot when a company was hiring for someone that would work in the department that we sold into. And that was a really good way of spotting someone was like doubling down on in their case, that it was their app. So that was, yeah, super interesting. Oh, Alex, yeah, partners. This is a really good one. Okay, so partners, I did a podcast recently with a former colleague of mine that runs a company called Partnerize. And we were talking about like, it's basically like free information because the partners can connect you to people that have sold to the customer before. So yeah, I think that's a really good one. Partner intel, good stuff. What else? Yeah, I think you're right, Frederic. Good one, Joseph. Definitely around the okay, so actually, just what you're saying there as well, Frederic. One that I used to do a lot was, and this depends on what you sell, but actually research the tech stack itself. And I'm sure someone else probably said that as well, but a couple of things I find were useful from that was, first off, you could you get a feel for what kind of company they are. If you look and they're like wall-to-wall Oracle, or they're like Adobe, Salesforce, you're like, okay, they have big, you know, they have big budgets to bring that in. If it's like, if they're using MailChimp to send emails, it's probably not a good sign if you've got like a super enterprise product, right? So you can get a feel for their appetite to spend, I suppose, one way of putting it, or how much they value tech. Another one here, I think, is just to be, you know, your use cases that may be applicable. On
that one, I mean, does anyone have a silver bullet for tech stacks in Africa? Because I know there are resources available in other markets, but I mean, the only way we find out this information is by actually asking the customer.
Or anywhere, not even in Africa. Sometimes that stuff is really difficult to find.
Yeah.
I think it's easy if they're running the technology on their website, right? Because you can use like the built withs of this world, and they can see the tags that get fired when the technology is used. But I think, you know, anything behind that kind of that cloak of it's not, you know, firing anything publicly, it does become challenging. And I think that's, you know, that's where your partner network can come in really well. I think that probably links, and let's probably move partners over here a bit as well, because I think that links quite well. Okay, there's so many good stuff in it. Oh yeah, Ian, good one. Recent exec movement. This is a really interesting one. I think LinkedIn does quite a good job of this, where you click on a company profile, and you can start to sort of see who's kind of I can't remember what it's called, but it shows sort of senior people that have moved in or out. And you know, I know that, you know, if you're selling, for example, in our world, if you're selling sales tech and you see that they've recently hired a new CRO, you know, there's probably, you know, CROs don't tend to move on, you know, when things are going really well. So you may be able to tap into something that's going on there. So that's a great one, Ian. I like that. Yeah, built with, good shout there, Elizabeth. That's a really good tech. What else? Crunchbase is a good one as well, actually. I think Crunchbase is good for more of the, you can get a feel for investments and stuff. So that's probably worth calling out up here, sort of Crunchbase for, like, you can find, you know, a lot of us will sell into companies that are private. So Crunchbase to find funding. Cool. All right. There's going to be loads more of these, but and we can kind of go on. I want to crack on. to this bit. So this is the pre-work. So this is kind of the research, but then in terms of pre-work, so for example here, just to set us off, send an agenda. And does anyone have any best practices with sending agenda? Do you have any I know it sounds really easy and obvious, but I know some people have different approaches with the agenda. I'd love to hear if anyone does anything with their agendas when they send them over.
I've once or twice in a session, I've just put a question mark and then defined it in session.
Okay. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. I think leave open. I think that's something that can work. What I would say is I've seen people do is like, how can you get the customer to add? Because you know what customers are like, especially in the first meeting. They just go, yeah, that sounds great. But we want to almost like entice them to kind of bring something in. Leave section. Someone in my team before would leave a section and go, hey, I've saved part 2 of the agenda for you, for customer to, and ask them to send it back, to come back and say, and at least even if they come back and say, no, we're good, that's all good, that at least you've tried. Only 3 bullet points of topic in the agenda. Oh, okay. Can you expand on that a little bit first, Joe? Quite like that.
Sure. Modern human psychology means we tend to not retain things past 3 points on the list. After that, you got to start writing things down or taking more notes. So given that, I try to apply the rule of 3 to just about everything I do when it comes to engagements. And I find if I post more than 3 topics, that may overwhelm the customer at first glance, and they might, get the instinctual eye roll, like this is going to go on forever. Whereas if I just limit it to 3, that tends to be the most palatable across the board, and not just for the customers, but if I'm bringing on extra resources on our end, whether it's folks for a demo or deeper conversations, limiting it to 3 talking points will make them more engaged as well. Now that doesn't mean you can't branch out or that your bullet isn't very vague in that topic could go on for much more than what it shows. But from the psychological perspective, you're more likely to get the customer to show up if you limit what you're going to discuss.
I like it. Perfect. Sounds great. I agree with that. I think that's a good shout. And what you're talking about there is what we shouldn't forget is, a lot of the time, for all the right reasons, we've really kind of pulled the meeting. We've maybe through some ingenuity by an SDR that's done a great job of catching someone that's been difficult to get hold of his attention, and we've got a meeting in. So, in those instances, I think it's really, really important that we don't blow it by being proactive, by sending an agenda and the customer's like, oh, I don't want to do this. So yeah, good one there. One of my favorites that I will talk about all day is EB engagement. And some of you may be thinking, hang on a minute, like we haven't even met the customer yet, but that's the point, right? Because one of the challenges, as we know with economic buyer engagement, is that we leave it too late because we're kind of trying to build to it. But it's almost like, I always see it as like this, like really like knife edge thing of, right, you're building to the opportunity. And if that opportunity is so minute, when's the right time to engage the economic buyer? If you kind of leave it, that soon as you go past it, then it starts to get awkward about like, why are you reaching out now? And generally what I found in my career was you'd find yourself in these war room situations where the deal would start to go a bit sideways. And then we'll go, oh, well, we must engage the economic buyer. And it would be like, not just on the back foot, you'd be like a few steps back. So getting that early economic buyer engagement super early on. And again, like this is use exec team. So this is not for the individual contributors to do. This is for if you're an individual contributor, your boss's boss, or even, I actually used to use founders of the companies that work for a lot to do this. It would, stand down the inbox. Obviously, you write the inbox. Actually, I think it's SalesLoft. I was talking to the other day, and I think they actually have an acronym for this of where you draft an email for someone else. They do it so often they've got an acronym for it. I don't know if anyone has that acronym, but I'll try and remember what it is. Obviously, like all acronyms, I forget them, so kind of defeat the point of them. So there you go.
Just a question on that, Andy. So, I mean, practically, you haven't even really had a conversation with the organization yet. So what are you talking about? I mean, how are you generating that engagement if you don't necessarily know if there's synergy or if there's something to be solved?
Yep. Yeah. Great question. What I will say is I'll direct you to, we talked about this a bit in the huddle we did about the economic buyer, because there's a lot of people who've heard me go on about this for a while, but effectively what it's about is it's about reaching out and saying, hey, like, say I'm reaching out to you, Alex, and you're the economic, or you're my suspected economic buyer, as you rightly say at this point. I'm reaching out and saying, hi, I'm Andy. I lead the team for MEDDICC here in Europe, whatever it is. And my Aidan in my team is meeting with Stephanie in your team next week. And we're really excited about it for these reasons, because we've helped a company like you 1, 2, and 3, or whatever it is. I wanted to just reach out to you to introduce myself and say that, you know, if the meeting goes well, then I'll be offering my executive support to this project. I don't have any ask for you right now, but I'll update you following the meeting to let you know how it went from our perspective. So there's like no ask. You're not trying to like get a call with them. You're just saying, hey, like, I'm here. And in the example, my best example ever with it was where we had a deal that was a great deal, and the customer went to ground on us. We had nothing left to use, but we did have this this kind of connection to the economic buyer that we'd made before the first meeting. That revisiting that connection opened the opportunity back up, and we won the deal from it. So it definitely works. But yeah, I can see why you'd be a bit like, hang on a minute, how would you do that at this stage? So yeah, it's a bit different, but it works. Cool. I
may pause there for a moment. A couple kind of red flags around that particular approach. One, just being from a process perspective, I like to keep the executive touch or alignment a little bit for a little bit mid to late, depending on whether you can get some executive push to move the deal along and you really just want to engage the signatory later on as a means to update them and bring them into the fold, that executive bump later. But the risk in doing it so early is, in my mind, is sometimes the champion may feel like they've been gone around, or explicit requests, right? A lot of conversations that folks are having are not evangelical, but they're kind of educational. They're earlier stage, right? And so to put the cart in front of the horse like that may be potentially a little bit of undue or unappreciated pressure. And if it's irrelevant, it's not a relevant project to the signatory, for example, and you come out of the woodworks so hot, so early, without any really concrete examples of the outcome or any foreknowledge of the project, I think that it could go either way, 50-50.
Yeah. And that's why there's why you're not doing it if you're the salesperson and you're using your exec to do it, and there's no kind of ask. It's just like and if you think about it, if you zoom out from this for a second, you're not making any ask, and you're just kind of introducing yourself based on a meeting going in the calendar. Now, obviously, you don't necessarily do this for every meeting, by the way, but this is like, if it's like an ideal customer profile, good meeting, worth the investment of time to do this. What can happen if you kind of roll it through your head, what could happen if this goes wrong, is the economic goes, whoa, hang on a minute, like, why are you looking at buying more software? Why are you looking at buying another solution? We can't buy anything right now. Thank God, like, hallelujah, like, that's a good thing to find out at this stage, because that's just going to save you probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, a month, 2 months, 3 months of kind of working towards getting to that point. So it kind of, it can smoke you out. But again, like a lot of this stuff, this is a tactic. No one will know better than you whether it's going to work with your type of customer you're selling to. All right.
Yeah, Elizabeth makes a good point. The decision maker signatory doesn't always really know that there's going to be a groundswell, there's an impetus, and it's a relevant project until such time as it's fleshed out further. And it becomes a priority item, it becomes something that you scavenge for budget to finance. So obviously there's value in having the conversation, and I think it would be very much dependent on the situation and the relationships as well.
Yeah, I agree. All right, is there any other things we can do, kind of actions we can take ahead of that first meeting? I think kind of partner intel, I think that was a really good one. I think I'm going to put that over both, because I think that's very much an action, if you see what I mean, than a research. So is there anything else we would do at this stage?
Andy,
yeah.
Sorry, I'd love to add something, and it's actually pretty powerful and we so overlook it. It's like when we start researching and we start building our own foundation of how we're going to build, that value proposition and get them to give us their time. It's like, who do we have in common? Right? Like, look at LinkedIn. Like, who do we have in common? Do they know any of our executive leaders? Do they know anyone, our customers, right? Are they connected with any of our first, the owners, right? The people that we know that, are actually using our product or solution today, right? So I feel sometimes even I myself tend to overlook that. And it's like, duh, let's go back to simple, right? You see, especially in LinkedIn Navigator, you kind of see who your first connection is and flesh out if that's something of value.
Yeah, I like that. That's really, you're right. It's almost like we sort of shy. We do so much good work, and sometimes the real contextual information that's really going to be useful, we don't ask for it. Okay. I know I scheduled in for this session, I think 45 minutes. I'm good to go to the hour because I think this is good, and I don't want to like hurry through the last bit of this. So I think, Andrea, you asked about recording. It is being recorded. And so if anyone has to drop it in 5 or 7 minutes, you can catch the rest on record. But as long as everyone else doesn't have a massive problem with that, should we carry on up until the hour? Yeah, I see lots of nodding heads. Cool. Okay, cool. All right. So we've done some good pre-work. And now we're into kind of, the meeting. The day is here, right? We're ready to go. What can we do 10 minutes, 15 minutes, before the meeting, but in line with being ready for the meeting? There's some stuff that really always, there's some stuff that really is for me best practice here. I'd love to, if anyone's got any ideas that things you do ahead of that meeting, get yourself in the zone.
Coffee, shower.
Jumping jacks.
Coffee and shower. Those.
I mean, I'm mostly joking, but
yeah.
I generally, I think that many of us have SDR or BDR relationships, but generally speaking, and this may deviate slightly from what you're actually asking, but relate to another principle of yours, which is not to shoehorn folks into a process that may not be relevant to them. Generally, I'll try to make sure that I understand what they want to get out of this call. So if we have an inbound lead, these are the highest likelihood for pipe op creation and close. So in advance, I do like to share a little bit of a high level overview with the folks. Also, especially if it's a demo request, for example, let's make sure that we're allowing them to leave with what they've asked for. So, demo request does not equal BANT, disco, and then to have a demo, it's a demo. So maybe the suggestion in advance is, hey, we booked half an hour. My thinking here is, let's learn a little bit about you. Let's also peek under the hood and really tuck into what the project may be, so that when you do leave this first call, you will have some understanding, some knowledge and confidence that if we continue the conversations, it's because it's a good fit and because there's something in this for you. So what I'm suggesting here is, in advance of a call, if you've booked it or your SDR has, great job. But let's get a sense for, if they were to invite other folks who would be interested in the project like this, who might they be? Let's get them on the call so that they get what they're asking for from that demo request, for example. And it also catapults you into the sales cycle. I get it's been very receptive audience since I've employed this, especially with those inbounds. You want to treat them like gold and not shoehorn them into our process, which won't velocitize the deal or leave them feeling particularly wowed.
I love that. Where do you do that? When do you do that, I should say?
Yeah, so I'll give a great example. Working with an all-star, I think Liz, Gav, booked a meeting, said, it came inbound, had been reaching out, they came inbound. Let's get 30 minutes in. And I said, hey, great idea. He already had it in the cal. And I said to him, Gav, this could be a really great opportunity for you to just get them on the line and say to them, listen, I'd be happy to push you through this process. It's what you kind of signed up for unwittingly, but we'd rather give you this value. So we have the 30 minutes. My offer to you is, grab your finance partner, grab this person you chatted about, whoever could be involved or interested. Let's put an hour in, buffer it by that half hour, and take a few steps out for you. So once the 30 minutes is actually in the cal, you can come back. And generally that's just because he would only have relayed the meeting book to me once it's in the calendar. But that's a great time to get back on the phone and just kind of double down on rapport, even if it's coming from your SDR. AEs can do it too, of course. But hey, thought about it, chatted with Maddie. We'd actually like you to leave feeling like you've gotten something for that time investment. If you're going to invest time in this project, who else might? And let's make sure that we're kind of singing from the same song sheet at the gate, and you're leaving with something. So it's once it's booked, just operationally, because that's how it seemed to happen. But now that it's in his head, he can parlay an inbound request that could have previously just been a discovery into a disco demo and loop in some additional stakeholders. If they don't want to attend, we'll still figure out who may be interested down the road. And so starting to build out how we can surround the account. Yeah.
I love that. For me, that actually that's in the pre-work. You're doing that ahead of the meeting, right?
Okay, good qualifying question then. Push it back a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So for this one, some ideas I was having when I was thinking about this is I never did this, but I've seen people do this before, where they resend the invite, so it goes to the top of the inbox. So it goes to the top of the customer's inbox, because you know what it's like. They're bouncing around. I mean, I know most of the time it's in the calendar now, but just in case they've forgotten, or you know what it's like when you're working from home, you can be like in the middle of something, but you still check your emails, but you don't check your calendar. So I like that as a practice to do. I think things that kind of, I know this sounds silly, but most people tend to, when we have, my experience is when we do Zoom and whatever meetings, camera on, I've noticed that if you don't put your camera on, the customer won't put their camera on. But if you have your camera on to start with, and they start without their camera on, they'll put their camera on. And I think, I know we're all like sensitive to Zoom fatigue and stuff, but I think it's if it's a customer meeting, it can really, really help to have the cameras on, just so we can help, read them better and that kind of stuff. I think is a really good one. Oh, Andrea, last minute check on LinkedIn for a post comments event. Yeah, I like that. So you're taking like a last minute kind of check in, just to see if anything's front of their mind. And I think that's a really good one. So check LinkedIn for what's on their mind, I like that.
I'll sometimes call a day before too, and leave a voicemail and just say, hey, we got a meeting tomorrow. Just want to make sure we're all set. If anything's changed, or conversely, if you're going to be more dramatic about it, you could say, hey, I got a concern. If you could please call me back, I can discuss it with you, and they'll call you back, hopefully. If they don't call you back, there's a red flag. And if they do call you back, what's your concern? Well, it's been a few weeks since we last spoke. I just want to make sure that our conversation is still set for tomorrow, and the topics are what you'd like to.
I like that. I like that a lot. One thing, this is a silly thing, but I noticed this is, if you're on with a colleague, say you're on with your SDR, you're on with an SE, and you're chatting, and then the customer joins, and you're going blah blah blah, and then the customer joins, and you sort of go, oh, and you just sit there, kind of going, oh, the customer's here, don't say anything, like, and it's super awkward. Just carry on talking. You see them coming, you kind of wave and go, yeah. So anyway, then we found the dog, and it was on the roof, and it had a backpack on, and anyway, hi Steve, how are you? I don't know where I was going with that, but so don't stop chatting.
Just involve them in it. I have a good pal I brought here from a previous gig, and we used to, my SE, he used to sit behind me. And so when we'd be on calls, I'd be able to say hello, and then he'd pop up and say hi. And now we have a cute little shtick about how he gets the east sun, so he'll be squinting, and I get the west in the evening. We both have wiener dogs, so I'm not going to be killed during this call. If you hear barking, it's for treats. So I mean, and ask them if they have pets, which who doesn't want to tell you about their pets or their people? Yeah,
I like it. Okay, let's move into the intro section. So what do we do at the start? I think, obviously agenda comes in. I think review agenda, ask them, usual kind of stuff. Ask them if they're have anything you want to change. See, Vanessa says, earn the right intro. So can you tell me a bit about that, Vanessa?
Yeah, so I guess it would be earn the right, in quotes, intro. So I always find it really powerful when people explain like why they have the right to be speaking to you, or the expertise relevant to the conversation. So you could say, hi, I'm Andy. I rolled out MEDDICC at so-and-so. I have all this experience doing this, this, and that, and this is my role now. So just to show that you know what you're talking about.
I love that. And that also, this is something that, funny enough, the person I used to work with, where we were talking about, don't stop talking when the customer joins, we also realized really quickly, particularly on like remote meetings, that whoever goes first in the introductions sets the tone for the introductions. So if someone just goes, hey, I'm Andy, nice to see you. Everyone else will go, hi, I'm Steve, hi, I'm Steph, whatever. If I go, hey, I'm Andy, I've worked here for 3 years, what my job is, and what I'm really looking to get from this meeting is this, then everyone else will follow that suit. So I think kind of setting the tone, but also like, you could even call it like / the agenda of intros. And I'll put more info on here. So it's like name, how long with the company, whatever these things are, you'll know what you're looking for, but just so you can get a feel for what they do, what they're looking to get from today. And I think you'll be amazed at how people follow suit. If I could type, it'd be better, wouldn't it? There we go. Cool. What else we got?
So one thing I wanted to add to that point exactly, because I just started here 5 months ago. So if I say, hi, I'm Elizabeth, I just joined Allocated 3 months ago, please trust me. I have on intro calls brought that up to light right away, but said, why have I come to join Allocadia? Because we're solving a really important problem challenge in so-and-so in your market, Mr. Marketing Operations Director, et cetera. So alternatively, because obviously we're going to have a lot of people moving into new roles, right, to use that as an opportunity to call it out. Because if you're checking them on LinkedIn, they're checking you on LinkedIn, right? So they're going to say, oh, Elizabeth's only been with this company for 3 months. What entitles her to be some sort of subject matter expert, right? The other thing too is, obviously you've done your research, so you kind of get a good understanding of that person or that stakeholder. What their tenure is at their organization. Have they gone through a series of promotions or advancements, or has their career evolved at that specific company? So for example, yesterday I had a discovery call with a gentleman in Portugal, and he'd been there for 12 years in different roles, but since that initial merger that happened in 2009 with the company he's with, right? So right away, I said, I noticed you've been with the organization since they merged, 12 years. Wow. And then it was more comfortable. And then he was like, are you recording this? Yeah. Is that a it's like, I'd rather you not. And I was like, no problem at all. But yeah, all that to say it was a great call.
Okay. I love that. That's good. All right. Anything else we do to kind of set the tone right at the start of the meeting? Anything that kind of springs to mind you do early on? I'm gonna bring in the kind of in terms of like transitioning from that kind of small talk agenda. I think M1s are a really good way of kind of bringing the proposition of what you do onto the table. Like we said earlier, without calling their baby ugly, we're talking about references. We're talking about how we've helped other people solve problems they may not even know that they know they have, but they didn't know they could be solved. So for me, it's a really good way of, as we all know from going through the program, but it's a really good way of solving that challenge of getting into a conversation, which for me is what discovery should be, a conversation with the customer about their goals, challenges, pains, all that sort of stuff, without it feeling like we're interrogating them, but also at the same time, without kind of pitching, presenting, we're kind of saying, hey, ahead of this meeting, I looked into who we've helped that I think is like you, and which companies I think we have as successful customers, which are similar to yours. And here's what I found, and here's why I think it's relevant. And I just think, those of you that have been using these, it's such when you see the customer kind of leaning in because they're like, oh, I know that company. And, oh yeah, we have that problem. And oh, if we could solve that, that would be really interesting. So I was, as a VP of sales I was talking to the other day, and he does this nice thing, which I think is great actually, where every time he walks his dog, he listens to I think it's a gong, but whatever, like call recorded, other sales recording software is available. And he listens into his team's calls. And he said, it might sound a bit sad, but I kind of relate to it. He said the other day he got like goosebumps because one of his team did an M1 intro, and the customer was just like gone from being like, you tell they're quite reserved to being like, wow, yeah, this is super cool. Like they kind of opened up, warmed up. So
before you move on from the M1s, I think they're a wonderful foot in the door to transition to something a little bit more solid, right? We've kind of explained why we're here, shared some information about shared some M1s, and then from there to give them some sense of what your hope is to accomplish, right? The goal for the meeting is to learn, to share, we're going to kind of explore, unpack together. It's going to be collaborative, et cetera. By the end of this meeting, my hope is that we will have learned some things about you, determined whether there is priority kind of alignment, so that if we do continue the conversation, you'll know that there is fit and there is enough in this project to warrant additional time and involvement from other folks. Does that work for you as kind of a goal to return to in the last few minutes of the call? So soft intro, sharing some information that could be relevant based on your research, but then also let it be clear, right? If it's something where you said, here's $100 if you take 15 minutes with me, that probably won't work. But if it has come in and maybe you've seen them more than once, we've done this before, let's get a sense for whether now's the right time, if there is enough alignment to make this juicy and relevant.
Yeah. I like that. I really like that. And you're doing that thing that's super, like, this is the thing I really love about qualification. Everything you said there is super common sense, makes, a customer cannot argue with that as being anything but good for them and good for you. But it also, which is one of my favorite things, it also does that thing where like you start explaining that, and particularly the part where you say like, hey, if we don't find there's value here, then, we'll put it down to some good experience for both of us and we'll go our different ways.
I'll be upfront. Right.
Yeah, they're like, what? You're not going to pester me? Like, you must be really busy. You must have loads of customers. Whatever you're selling must be really good, because for you to kind of push me aside if you don't think I'm good enough for you, then that's kind of where the customers go.
That's such a good point. I mean, you're saying out the gate, if I don't think there's alignment, I'll be upfront. Similarly, if for whatever reason you don't think it's the right time, that's fine. If you're not the person at your business who may own a project like this, but what we talk about, you think that warrants kind of a lateral introduction, is that something you'd be open to, right? So you want to kind of get a sense for whether there is agreement, because every big yes is a series of smaller yeses, and you can still learn even if it's not the right person to be talking to right now.
Love it. Love it. All right, let's move on to the actual part of the meeting. This one, actually, a lot of people will think this has got all the stuff in it, but this is very much around you. This is very much about your proposition. So in terms of preparing for this bit, I think there's a few things you can do. One of my favorites is kind of leaving time for Q&A. And this kind of relates back to the agenda. I think I might have mentioned this to some of you before, but I have this hack where I would, as a salesperson, I would often forget to say at the start of the meeting, please ask questions as they come to you. I'd always want that, but I'd forget to say it. You get 10 minutes in and someone say, would you mind if I ask a question? You'd be like, yeah, cool, please do. So I would always put Q&A on my agenda for two reasons. First off, it builds a buffer of time in at the end of the meeting. So if you reverse engineer for how long you've got, you build that buffer in. So, we all know the last sort of few minutes of a meeting is the most important, because you want to lock in those next steps. So it would build that kind of protection in at the end, but it would also prompt me to say, by the way, I've put Q&A on just in case we have anything we want to come back to, but please ask questions as and when they come to you, if that's what you want as a salesperson, by the way. But I would always want that. So leaving time for Q&A in the agenda, I think, is a good one. Wow, you two type so fast. Yeah, I agree with that, Elizabeth. That kind of thanks for your time thing is for me, it's really borderline on a whole lot of bad messaging that we don't necessarily want to give. So I think being proactive and saying, I thought it was a really good session, that kind of thing, is a good way to go. Cool.
Has anyone else had success framing next steps at the start of calls? It's something that I tend to do often. I find it takes moves the elephant out of the room at the end of the call if you've vocalized that at the start of the session, be it discovery, demo, technical demo, whatever it happens to be, so they have the remainder of the time in the session to consider my proposed next steps. Then I can lock it in at the end and circle back. Oh, I hate circle back. Sorry.
Close the loop, take it offline. I throw that in after the kind of general just consensus check there. This is what my goal is. Let me know if it fits, doesn't fit, if you're the right person, not the right person. And at the end of it, if you have an idea that there is value in this, the next thing that would typically come for us is XYZ. What would it look like for you to continue the evaluation?
Yeah, I like that. Oh. Okay. Two things I just want to do. A couple of things that we'll move over to this bit here. A couple of things that I think are really good practice that I've learned over the years. I want to just share before we run out of time. First is to reserve time after the meeting with your champion. Oh, actually, that's more of a sorry. That with your team to do a debrief. Then, sorry, just while I think of that, that's maybe if you when you've got like a second meeting or third meeting, but we all talk about the challenge we have remote selling now, where we don't get that kind of time in the lobby area and reception, walking to the meeting room and back before and after the meeting. I always say you can manufacture those sessions by putting 15 minutes before and after the meeting in with your champion, just to do like, you know, hey, we've got this meeting today, there's more people here, I just want to show you what I'm talking about presenting, and you just get a bit of time, more space time with your champion. Likewise, let's do a quick debrief, see how the meeting went afterwards. So that's one thing to do. This is a funny one, but I really believe in, like, if you're talking about, like, you know, 1% marginal gains better, have your follow-up email written ready to go before you even go into the meeting. So have your follow-up ready, and then you just fill in like the bits that are relevant to it. So, you know, the customer, like, straight away, you're on the front of their mind, and before you've even had a chance to think about something else, boom, you're back up front of the mind. So email ready to go. And then connect on LinkedIn. Does anyone have any other things you do after a meeting? Like
I mean, are we talking first meeting? I mean,
Yeah.
if it goes super great and they want to involve additional stakeholders, but they don't know how, there are some options we can, you know, kind of facilitate either a workshop to figure out what matters to who and whether they would figure into the decision-making process. What's the scenario? Are you looking to book another call? Have you booked another call?
I think this is, you've booked, I think we're assuming we've booked the next step. So this is just when you kind of, you follow up afterwards. So it's probably, I think another good one is to include proposed decision criteria in follow-up.
I think just value adds as well. Hey, by the way, I found this report, thought you might find it useful.
Nice.
Linked to what we discussed in the session.
Cool. I like that as well. Value add. All right, we are right up on time, and I don't want us to run over any more than we already have. So thank you, everyone. I will obviously the recording this will be made available. I'll share like a nice shot of this as well, so we can all kind of get the feedback as we've gone. But yeah, thank you, everyone. That was I thought that was a really, really good session. I really enjoyed that, and I thought it was some really superb insights there. So thanks everyone for participating. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, Andy.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Andy.